In a 2020 peer-reviewed paper that mentions rebirth, academic Alexander Onimus presents a hypothesis suggesting that the CIA and the Monroe Institute's research offers a feasible method for achieving backward time travel, granting individuals the ability to alter the past while simultaneously creating multiple branching timelines in the process. In the 1960s, when the US Defense Department uncovered the scale of Soviet occult experiments, the revelation sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Years later, the CIA released documents confirming its own experiments. But one page was missing. A page that described contact with a dimension beyond our own. Officially, the CIA denied knowledge of its existence. But before the end of this episode, we'll independently prove that they discovered something about the universe no one has spoken about. What monsters did they encounter? And what fractures in reality occurred?
On Saturday, November 4th, 1944, Salim al-Amdari was born into an ordinary, humble, yet loving family in Fallujah, Lebanon. His birth, at first glance, appeared unremarkable, but as time unfolded, his parents began to notice something strange, subtle at first, yet increasingly disturbing. From the very beginning, Salim bore an unusual, seemingly benign defect, a prominent bump that looked like an injury on the back of his head, which his mother dismissed as a birthmark. But as he grew older, other unusual things about him began to emerge. His first words as a toddler were Bedouin, stones, and hit. As he grew older, he became haunted by painful headaches and horrific nightmares of a teenage boy he had never met before, meeting a gruesome end somewhere in the neighboring country of Syria, a place where he had never been. His parents dismissed these visions as merely the imaginations of a child, but in 1966, at the age of 21, Salim and his father traveled from Lebanon to the town of Al-Qariyah in Syria, where they stumbled upon a terrifying revelation. They learned in 1942, 2 whole years before Salim was born, a 15-year-old boy had been savagely slain in Al-Qariyah by Bedouins during a tribal dispute. Yet, this was no ordinary boy. The child who had lost his life was somehow Salim himself. But how was this possible? Little did Salim or his parents know that, according to certain historic traditions, his 1944 birth may have been the result of a cosmic aberration, one that manifests disproportionately among segments of the Lebanese population. An anomaly that, in a neighboring tradition, hints not only at alternate dimensions and fractured timelines, but at something far more sinister. A grand conspiracy, one designed to control the very fabric of reality itself. This theoretical anomaly has a name. It's called the Tree of Death. In 2003, the CIA declassified a 29-page report originally drafted in 1983 by U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel McDonald. The document explores various methods of mind alteration, which McDonald collectively refers to as the Gateway Experience. According to the CIA's declassified files, a program called the Gateway Project, developed by the Monroe Institute for Applied Sciences in 1971, facilitated these Gateway Experiences experiments as part of U.S. intelligence gathering efforts. McDonald's findings suggest that human consciousness can interact with a dimension the Monroe Institute labeled as the Absolute, a higher dimensional reality that transcends all realities and exists outside of space-time. And according to the declassified CIA files, agents made contact with the Absolute via a variety of mental exercises. But how does this connect to Salim al-Andari, a 21-year-old living in 1960s Lebanon who seemingly noticed a type of slip in time decades earlier? According to popular fringe theories, his time slips could have occurred in at least 3 different ways, all of which are potentially interconnected. The first explanation is rooted in the occult. It suggests that at some point in history, or perhaps outside of history, Salim's consciousness momentarily traveled beyond the boundaries of time through a Typhonian wormhole, an historic concept tied to a particularly dark interpretation of the Kabbalah developed by Kenneth Grant, a disciple of the occultist Aliester Crowley. Those who believe in the existence of these wormholes could propose that Salim had to have entered an extra-dimensional location known as the Qliphothic space, a realm also known as the Tree of Death. As mentioned in the previous episode, in Kabbalistic mysticism, this space is a hidden dimension filled with terrifying spirits, demons, and entities, through which the human soul also passes. The second explanation doesn't involve a time slip in the traditional sense, but instead aligns with the CIA's gateway process experiments. In a roundabout way, Qliphothic space and the Absolute share a fundamental characteristic. Not only are they both theoretical extra-dimensional locations that exist outside of time, but any human that interacts with these dimensions become an instance of a phenomena commonly referred to as reincarnation. It should be noted that Lebanon has more documented cases of reincarnation than anywhere else in the Middle East. Why? Because the country is home to a unique and deeply historic religious community known as the Druze. Our third explanation.
The declassified CIA documents confirm reincarnation is a real thing that exists. The 29-page report titled Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, conducted by United States Army Intelligence in 1983, asserts that consciousness never dies.
Consciousness, such a loose word to describe something that's so tremendously vast. And human consciousness in and of itself, what we know of it today, is only perhaps a fraction of the reality of what human consciousness can be. Gateway helps you explore the borders, the edges of human consciousness as we know it. The tools we provide, again, help you do and perform that exploration.
Since the Gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, it moves it outside even the restrictions of space and time. With this, the report goes on to suggest that memories and experiences from our lives are carried forward in reincarnation.
The Druze make up 5.5% of Lebanon's population and adhere to an unusual Abrahamic tradition that incorporates reincarnation into their spiritual worldview. The CIA's Monroe Institute findings on reincarnation via the Gateway process most famously corresponds with a long study conducted by the University of Virginia, where they chronicled instances of this phenomena amongst the Druze communities of Turkey and Lebanon. In 1961, one of the pioneers in this field who spearheaded research across the Middle East was the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, who served as a chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. In 1967, Salim al-Andari became a confirmed instance of this phenomena after being personally interviewed by Stevenson. For your info, we'll refer back to Salim's case throughout this episode, Not because he has any direct ties to the work done by the CIA, because he doesn't, but because his case study will serve as an anchor for all the high strangeness we've covered so far and what is yet to come, especially when this topic gets absolutely insane in the second half of this episode. While Salim's case offers a fascinating lens into the phenomena, it is far from isolated. For example, the Lebanese historian and anthropologist Najla Abu Izz al-Din conducted one of the most detailed and thoroughly verified investigations into an alleged case of reincarnation known to date. Here, in July 1982, in Qabr Shamoun, Lebanon, Fuad Assad Khaddaji lost his life amid the country's decade-and-a-half-long conflict. But nearly 10 years later, on February 29, 1992, in Ba'alshmi, Lebanon, Nazih al-Danaf was born, allegedly carrying vivid memories of Fuad's past life, including detailed recollections of his experiences and violent passing. Then there was Saada Hattoum, who was succumbed to a rare heart disease on March 11, 1972, in Richmond, Virginia, in the US, only to be allegedly reborn just 10 days later as Suzanne Ghanem on March 21, 1972, in Shuwaifat al-Amrusiyya, a Druze suburb of Beirut. Considered as one of the most famous reincarnation cases in Lebanon's history, this time documented by Ian Stevenson. What made Susan's story unique was a dream her mother, Munira, had days before Suzanne's birth. In the dream, Saada Hattoum appeared to her and said, "I'm going to come to you." It's even rumored that the British Lebanese barrister, Amal Clooney, whose father is Druze, may not only be an instance of this phenomena, but her husband George Clooney as well. We will get back to the CIA and the extra-dimensional locations shortly, but first, let's clarify Salim al-Andari's story. The Druze believed in taqammus, the seamless reincarnation of the soul into a new body, typically within the same religious community. In Kabbalistic thought, a similar concept exists, Gilgul Nishamut, where spirits reincarnate to achieve spiritual correction. Born in 1944, Salim and his father, who would later discover that a version of him had died in 1942, at the age of 15, was the alleged reincarnation of a boy known as Hassan Hamid, a Syrian Druze, from the village of Ari, Syria, near the town of Al-Qurya. When Hassan was about 15, one of his cousins was responsible for fatally injuring a Bedouin farmer. According to certain Bedouin customs of the time, the tribe of the harmed individual was expected to seek revenge by targeting either the person at fault or a close relative. Yet, despite this threat, Hassan's uncle still sent him to deliver livestock to a nearby town alone. Unfortunately, before he could even leave the district, a group of Bedouins intercepted him, dragging him to a pit where he was struck in the head and back with multiple stones. The date was Thursday, July 30th, 1942. 100 miles away, on Saturday, November 4th, 1944, Salim al-Andari was born in Fallujah, Lebanon, carrying memories and a head injury that should have been buried with Hassan. In Druze tradition, reincarnation is viewed as a natural law of integral part of the soul's journey. Similarly, Isaac Luria, one of the most significant figures in Kabbalah, believed that this law helps humanity confront and resolves the complexities of life.
What role does the Tree of Life play in the reincarnation process? A. The Tree of Life acts as a celestial chart guiding the soul across various realms of spiritual reality, termed Sephirah. Each Sephirah embodies a distinct manifestation of the divine effluence, and the soul is tasked with acquiring the teachings and virtues pertinent to these realms to achieve spiritual ascent.
However, some occult schools propose a far more unsettling concept, that reincarnation isn't merely a cycle, but a system that can be controlled. Although this idea of control is completely foreign to Druze and traditional Kabbalistic teachings, and goes against the core beliefs of most religions that believe in an afterlife. Among modern occult groups, few have explored these ideas more deeply than the Typhonian Ordo Templi Orientis, a group closely tied to Aliester Crowley and his system of thelema and magic. The Typhonian order believed that they could break through the spiritual barriers through using the aforementioned Typhonian wormholes as gateways to another plane of existence. Their philosophy was built on the idea that creation, especially through energy, was not just a physical act, but a spiritual one. Whether or not it resulted in the birth of a child, the energy produced by these rituals was thought to be powerful enough to pierce through these hidden realms. With a Qliphoth being an extra-dimensional realm where the natural cycles of rebirth could be manipulated, there may already be individuals and secret organizations, some with ties to the Typhonian order, actively working to achieve just that. Building on Crowley's magic, Kenneth Grant took this further, claiming that these rituals could be used to contact non-human entities beyond time and space.
Typhon tunnels are generated through sexual black magic ritual that are abused in children and adults. And this is a multi-dimensional strategy being used by the Antichrist entities to conquer the planet.
The Department of Defense should be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded.
Those were the words of Colonel Wayne McDonnell, written toward the end of the Gateway Report, raising unsettling questions. If sex rituals can open dimensional gateways, how does this connect to the Department of Defense? Some who believe in the Kabbalah suggest that the process of reincarnation could be manipulated not only by human institutions, but also by these non-human intelligences. And whether or not reincarnation is real, our question is, could the CIA be accessing a layer of reality that, if not virtually the same, could actually be exactly the same, spoken about by the Typhonian order? So, not only did the US military and intelligence consider this dimension to be real, but it was also considered inhabited by energy life forms, what we in Islam would typically refer to as either angels or, in the most broadest of terms, the Djinn. What is even more concerning is that one of the most critical parts of the report, page 25, was missing for decades. Gaslighting a multitude of freedom of information requests, the CIA's position on the missing page was one of ignorance until in 2021, when an investigative journalist from Vice magazine discovered that the Monroe Institute had the page all along. Titled under the word absolute, page 25 describes this realm as an infinite, intelligent energy behind all creation. It speaks of the universal hologram that reality exists within, represented as a spiraling torus or cosmic egg, constantly folding in and out of itself. Although the phrasing is problematic, since it falls under the theological definition of polytheism, McDonnell points out that this spiral model of creation already exists in multiple ancient religions, including that of the Abrahamic tradition, specifically stating by name the Hebrew tree of life from the Kabbalah. But here's where it gets crazy. No one, at least not anyone with a decent-sized platform, as far as we are aware, has publicly made the connection that we are about to lay out. And this is being said not to gloat, but to underscore how strange it is that no one has said this out loud, again as far as we are aware. The inverse of the tree of life is the Qliphoth, or the tree of death, and we believe that it is a map of that same space the CIA calls the Absolute, a realm of predatory, non-human intelligences, just like those described in occult systems or encountered by Aliester Crowley in his communion with the entity Aiwass following his wife's vision of Horus in Cairo, an Eldritch Preterhuman entity that we covered in the previous episode and will play a major role before the end of this. So in short, the CIA discovered the Qlifoth, a realm where Crowley and Kenneth Grant say can be accessed by sex magic, wherein the brain achieves a higher state of consciousness through the energy physical intimacy produces, but the CIA discovered via other means. And if Grant is correct, this realm that he says is inhabited by Lovecraftian Eldritch entities, those entities could be the same intelligent life forms Colonel McDonnell warns about in his report. In Islam, we call this place Barzakh, a purgatorial realm where both human and non-human intelligences wait for the day of judgment. McDonnell's reference to a spiralized tree of life suggests that he was working within a framework not far removed from Hermetic Kabbalah. He just used the language of physics instead of magic. That's not to say the Kabbalah's view of the afterlife is correct. Only that the CIA's model seems to align with the Qlifoth to an uncanny degree. Because no one else had made such a link, we wanted to verify if we're not just imagining such a connection. So using AI, we ran a comparison and developed this chart of the CIA's so-called absolute versus the Kabbalistic concept of the Qlifoth, or the Tree of Death. Now, while they come from radically different traditions, one from classified defense documents, the other from esoteric mysticism, the overlap is hard to ignore. Firstly, we broke things down into a simple framework. Here we created a column called Aspect, listing key traits, characteristics, and concepts that define this extra-dimensional place. Then we added two more columns, one for the CIA's model of the Absolute, as outlined in the Gateway process, and another for the Kabbalistic model of the Qlifoth. This gave us a side-by-side comparison. Finally, we introduced a match percentage column, rating how closely each aspect aligns between the two systems, with a short explanation justifying the score. The goal wasn't to prove they're identical, but to show that they might be describing the same place, just through different lenses. And the results were kind of disturbing. Now, to save time, we aren't going to list all of our findings, just the most noteworthy. So firstly, both the Absolute and the Qlifoth describe a layered structure that exists beyond ordinary perception. For the CIA, it's a holographic torus field, a spiraling matrix of consciousness. For Kabbalists, it's a shadow tree, a reflection of the tree of life. Different words, same architecture. Estimated match 85%. Secondly is that both systems warn of serious psychological and spiritual danger. The CIA calls it ego disintegration or exposure to unknown entities. The Qlifoth speaks of madness, spiritual collapse, even demonic contact. In terms of risk profile, that's a 90% match. And finally, both are accessed in similar ways. The CIA uses sound waves and remote viewing protocols. Kabbalists use ritualized intimacy and meditation, but both result in altered states of consciousness, unlocking the same doors through different keys. That's an 80% overlap. When we collated all the results beyond what we have just highlighted, we found an overall estimated alignment of around 70 to 75%. While the CIA's Absolute and the Qlifoth aren't identical, they appear to be different perceptual angles of the same hidden layer of reality. In other words, both the Absolute and the Qlifoth are more likely than not describing the same place. Therefore, in our view, the Qlifoth is most likely the Djinn dimension, or perhaps Barzakh. Why? Well, as mentioned in a previous episode, when Egyptian and Libyan residents experimented with a form of DMT, they described entering a realm inhabited by Djinn-like entities. Their accounts bore striking similarities to depictions of both the Qlifoth and the Absolute, especially in how all three are accessed through altered states of consciousness. This further supports the idea that these names may refer to the same underlying realm, seen through different lenses. This leaves us with a chilling question. If this relatively small YouTube channel, The Mysterious Middle East, operated by 3 guys, 2 of which, including me, are only voiceover artists, working off a coffee-stained MacBook, using open-source documents, books, ancient metaphysics, and a lot of intuition, was able to independently piece together that the CIA's model for the absolute almost exclusively mirrors Kabbalistic theory of this realm. What do you think a military-grade AI, trained on classified data, ancient texts, remote viewing logs, and decades of black-budget research, has already discovered? Assuming that they are indeed still investigating anomalous methods to beat their enemies, and we know that's a huge and unlikely assumption, they're not just making diagrams. They're likely simulating consciousness, testing interfaces, and running experiments through tech-assisted awareness. And the goal isn't just spying on enemies or recovering ancient relics, like the Ark of the Covenant we mentioned in an earlier episode. It's not even just about the potential dangers posed by the entities said to inhabit this realm. The real issue is the strategic advantage of understanding and possibly controlling the physics of this dimension. Because if the CIA's model aligns with the Kabbalah, they'd also know about the Typhonian hypothesis, the idea of wormholes, and the possibility of controlling reincarnation itself.
The Gateway Report suggested memories and experiences from our lives are carried forward in reincarnation. But why was the US interested in studying such a thing? They wanted to know if shifting someone's consciousness outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space would allow them to spy on our enemies.
And now a second disclaimer. Even though we personally don't believe in reincarnation, something is happening in this space between spaces that allows human consciousness to glimpse lives that came before. And the answer probably lies in the entities that live in this realm. But we'll come back to that later. But for now, when it comes to the CIA, how exactly could reincarnation become a strategic asset? As we mentioned in an earlier episode, there's at least one case where reincarnation, politics, and national security may have quietly converged. The case of Dr. Salim Musa Achi. This individual, born June 1st, 1909 in Palestine, may be an essential key to understanding this entire riddle of reincarnation from the CIA to the Typhonian Order. Because even if a fraction of the accounts surrounding him are accurate, Dr. Salim was not just an unusual figure. He was 100% anomalous. Reports concerning Dr. Salim's anomalous attributes ranged from transmutation and alleged immortality to the generation of self-replicating doppelgangers and, most notably, controlled reincarnation. Moving to Lebanon in his youth, by the 1940s, his reputation had grown so significant that an entire movement, Daeshism, formed around him. But in 1944, Lebanon's president stripped him of citizenship and expelled him, allegedly in part due to the influence he held over individuals closely connected to the government, who had personally witnessed unexplained phenomena surrounding him. And this is where his story gets extremely strange. In 1947, he was detained in Azerbaijan under suspicion of espionage. And while official statements from Lebanese and Iranian authorities confirmed that he had been dealt the maximum punishment for such a crime, on that same day, multiple people in Lebanon reported seeing him, sometimes in different places at once. To skeptics, it was merely a case of confusion or impersonation. But within Daeshist belief, these humanoid copies were attributed to spiritual fluids, entities linked to Dr. Salim's consciousness that could physically manifest. Some witnesses even claimed to see multiple instances of these entities in a single location at once. Historically, this maps onto documented cases of bilocation. In occult terms, however, it's academically consistent with the lore behind Typhonian wormholes and the fragmented consciousnesses said to emerge from the Kulifothic plane. Dr. Salim's story may sound like myth, but its components, transmutation, identity replication, and reincarnation, align with long-standing intelligence interests. They read less like folklore and more like the blueprint for an ideal operative. Mastery over form, identity, and continuity of consciousness aren't the kind of traits agencies ignore. They study them. And while no agency has officially acknowledged his existence, it would be no surprise if he's already appeared on classified radars. His second and final passing was officially recorded in Connecticut, United States on April 9, 1984. Since then, there have been no confirmed reports of his return. Aside from a Reddit post in the 2010s concerning an alleged modern-day encounter, no official statement from his followers has verified whether Dr. Salim has reincarnated again, as far as we are aware. If, however, there are any followers watching this episode, your input would be appreciated. And before we continue, a brief word to followers of Dahishism, and by extension, the Druze faith or any other belief. No offense is intended. The last time we explored reincarnation in Lebanon, it caused a mild but polite stir. As with most topics on this channel, when it comes to the paranormal and unexplained, we approach things from a neutral perspective, sometimes immersive, sometimes critical, but rarely reflective of our personal beliefs. Think of us less like critics, and more like amateur detectives or historians with a Wi-Fi connection. Now, looking at this case study, if even a part of what's said about Dr. Salim is true, and if his abilities mirror those outlined in the CIA's various fringe programs, then he wasn't really paranormal. He was something far more significant. He was, or theoretically is, human potential fully awakened. A prototype of what we could become. Yet, from another darker angle, Kabbalistic or Typhonian, even Gnostic, he may not be considered human at all. Perhaps he was an interface, a point of contact between our world and something older, stranger, an Eldritch consciousness, fragmented across realities, given life through reincarnation. From this alternative occult perspective, could Salim have theoretically emerged from the absolute or Qliphothic realm? Not just once, but again and again through rebirth? If so, reincarnation, it's a doorway, a system, and someone or something may already be using it. In Kenneth Grant's Typhonian tradition, entities from the night side, the realm where Qliphothic space exists, are believed to intervene in human affairs, sometimes through possession, sometimes through direct inspiration, and in rare cases, through full incarnation into the physical world. Within this theoretical framework, the term preterhuman is used. It describes an intelligence or force that is neither human nor divine, but something in between, operating outside normal evolutionary lines. Seen through this Kabbalistic lens, Dr. Salim's wide range of documented abilities suggests he could, theoretically, be an emissary of an Eldritch Preterhuman intelligence. Earlier, Karim mentioned Suzanne Ghanem's case, whose parents are Druze. Her mother dreamt of a woman saying she was coming to her. But what if that wasn't Hatum in the dream? What if it was something else? Here, we should introduce the controversial medieval Egyptian ruler Al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah, a central figure in the Druze faith and considered one of the earliest examples of reincarnation within it. To his followers, he was not merely a human reborn, but the ultimate entity in human form. This radical claim sets Druze belief apart from the rest of mainstream Abrahamic doctrine, establishing a unique theological identity, originating in part from the legacy of this charismatic ruler.
After his mysterious disappearance, his followers in Egypt were persecuted and exterminated, but the faith survived in Lebanon, Syria, and other parts of the Levant. In 1044, however, after a brief period of evangelism, the Druze faith closed itself to converts, effectively isolating the community from the region's larger religious populations. This action became particularly significant in the context of reincarnation, as it later provided compelling evidence for the phenomenon's manifestation in the 20th and 21st century Lebanon. a country where the population is nearly evenly split between Christians and Muslims. While reincarnation is largely absent from all Orthodox Abrahamic doctrines, there are documented cases of individuals being born into one religion while recalling past lives from another. Salim al-Andari appears to be one such case, as some sources state his family were of Christian origin.
With him, Suzanne, and other examples of reincarnation regardless of the faith this phenomena manifest in, we can perhaps apply a classical Abrahamic religious explanation as to why it occurs, that being a supernatural spiritual influence. Now for the Druze, Al-Hakim, he is divine, destined to return. But his behavior in life and his sudden disappearance echo something older than sainthood. Historians describe him as erratic and contradictory, issuing strange decrees, some forbidding women from leaving their homes, others banning certain foods or festivals, only to reverse them later without explanation. With this in mind, some have speculated he may have been more than just a ruler, not merely eccentric, but possibly a host, a human consciousness acting as an interface for something beyond itself. If he was an instance of the reincarnation phenomenon, then from a traditional Abrahamic perspective, one could argue he was under the influence of a spiritual anomaly, perhaps even an avatar of such a being. This view aligns with certain strands of Jewish and Christian belief, where reincarnation is often rejected as divine truth, and instead explained as spiritual deception, foreign entities implanting memories of past lives into the minds of the living, what the CIA in their report would label as an intelligent, non-corporeal energy form. But in the same breath and using the same logic, those who believe in the righteousness of Al-Hakim bi Amrillah could say that that spiritual entity that used Al-Hakim as an avatar was indeed holy and divine. So in conclusion, would the CIA really have any interest in interacting with terrifying supernatural entities or concepts, like extra-dimensional realms and the strange intelligences that might dwell there? According to declassified research, obviously yes, though they later claim to have discontinued that work. Still, it's worth considering the possibility that such investigations either quietly continued or were picked up by more secretive organizations beyond public scrutiny, something we will explore in the next episode. Beyond merely observing paranormal phenomena, documented initiatives like Project Gateway, Project Stargate, and Project Sunstreak, all aimed at exploring the expansion of consciousness beyond the limits of space and time. Some authors and fringe researchers have taken this even further, speculating that reincarnation could be weaponized as a tool of psychological manipulation, or even used for something more extraordinary: the deliberate, strategic placement of certain individuals across different lifetimes and even across time itself. In a 2024 peer-reviewed paper, academic Alexander Onimus presents a hypothesis suggesting that the CIA and the Monroe Institute's Gateway process could even offer a feasible method for achieving backward time travel, granting individuals the ability to alter the past while simultaneously creating multiple branching timelines in the process. Whether or not this is true is unknown, but again, we will come back to that later. And what about individuals said to be at the center of such paranormal mysteries? People like Dr. Salim? As we already alluded to, Kenneth Grant interprets the Qliphoth as a realm populated by preterhuman entities eerily similar to those found in the works of H.P. Lovecraft. He speculates that Lovecraft may have unconsciously encoded hidden knowledge in his fiction, even though, as an atheist, he did not believe in such things. Grant's written works speaks of Thelemic magic, Qliphothic Kabbalah, and Crowleyan rituals with alien or interdimensional contact themes. He suggests that some of the entities Lovecraft described could be masks or aspects of real extra-dimensional intelligences encountered through ritual or trance. Though again, This is just one interpretation. Now, to be clear, we are not suggesting that Dr. Salim himself was an eldritch evil in this classical Lovecraftian sense, but possibly the exact opposite. As already mentioned, he may be an avatar or remnant from that realm, but still good or benevolent. And if the Qliphoth is truly the Djinn dimension, or Barzakh, that perspective of him could align with classical Islamic views that such spiritual or Djinn-like entities are not all necessarily evil, but like humans, diverse in their intentions, with some being good or just indifferent. And did Dr. Salim really reincarnate in the Azerbaijan incident, or at other points in history as we implied? According to the belief system that developed around him, it's possible, since his own doctrine suggests as much. Or perhaps it was the spontaneous manifestation of one of his supernatural copies that met its fate that day in Azerbaijan. These are, of course, spiritual theories, not empirical claims. And we leave it to you, the viewer, to consider what feels plausible. As for other stories of reincarnation, from Selim Al-Andari to Suzanne Ganem and even George Clooney, well, the theories vary. Skeptics suggest these are simply psychological fantasies or cultural influence, but others argue that this explanation doesn't account for the amount of data and consistency in such cases around the world. And like with Dr. Salim, the influence of otherworldly forces could be at play, at least according to neighboring alternative Abrahamic perspectives. Again, we leave it to you, the viewer, to consider what feels plausible. Finally, there's a multiversal aspect, and even a simulation aspect, which we don't have time to cover in this episode, but does relate to the broader narrative of a conspiracy of control regarding who is born where and when and how that can be controlled over multiple lifetimes. But because we are already approaching the 40-minute mark for this episode, let's save that for another time. But for now, we ask, if the CIA's Gateway Report implies a belief in reincarnation and confirms other dimensional life forms exist on a parallel plane, what other ancient forces could have known this and tried to take advantage of it? Are secret societies, perhaps in Turkey in the 1600s, already in control of this system? Well, that's where we're headed. In part 3, inspired by a request from one of our viewers, we journey to 17th century Turkey, into the shadowed edges of the Kabbalah. There, we'll break down the quantum mechanics of how this theoretical reincarnation process is actually said to work according to Typhonian and Kabbalistic occult theory, and how it ties into Satanism, Gnosticism, and yes, even time travel and the multiverse. Until then, like and share, and regardless of your religious perspective, we'd love to hear your theories, like what is this extra-dimensional space? And what kind of entities might dwell within it? Inshallah, we'll see you next time.